Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss about reflection of a point on a line which is parallel to the y-axis. Let's assume that the equation of the line is x equals a, and let's assume that our original point is at P, which is a pink dot right here, which is in the first quadrant. So let's assume that the location of the point P is x comma y, and then our task is to find out what would be the coordinates of its image, which let's assume P prime as the image, which is a green dot right here on the second quadrant. So let's assume that that is the image of our original point P, and we're going to name the image as P prime, and let's assume that the coordinates of P prime are x sub 1 comma y sub 1. Let's quickly talk about the straight line. Here x equals a, that straight line is a line parallel to the y-axis, and it's actually a units away from the y-axis. A units away on the right hand side from the y-axis, assuming a is a positive value there, right? So now that we are talking about reflection and image, we have to assume that this straight line, the x equals a, that straight line is going to behave like a mirror. So if we assume that to be a mirror, then we can think of an image, right? We can take a reflection of the original point P, and then we can form the image of that point. Now, from the principle of reflection of light, we know that the distance of the object from mirror is equal to the distance of its image from the mirror. So, in other words, here we can say AP, the distance of the object from the mirror. So, AP right here, so let me write it here. AP will be equal to AP prime. Both of those distances would be equal. One is the distance of the object from mirror, and the other one is the distance of the image from mirror. So those two distances would be equal. Now if that is the case, then if you think about the line segment P prime, that is a straight line there which is parallel to the x-axis, that line segment, the P prime line segment, has A as the midpoint there, because A is actually bisecting that line segment into two equal parts, right? So we can consider A to be the midpoint of that line segment, because AP is equal to AP prime. So A definitely is the midpoint, right? Now let's try to figure out what would be the coordinates of A. Well, the coordinates of A will be like this. So let me write it down here. What would be the coordinates? Well, the x coordinate will be just A units, because from the origin, so suppose this is our origin right here, from the origin you go A units on the x-axis to reach the point A, right? So its x coordinate would be just A units. And then what would be the y coordinate? Well, its y coordinate will coincide with the y coordinate of the original point P, because they both are at the same height there, right? So I'm going to write it here as y. So a comma y, that would be the coordinates of the point A, right? And now from the midpoint formula, what do we know? Well, from the midpoint formula we know that the x coordinate of the midpoint would be equal to half of the sum of the x coordinates of the extreme point. So I'm going to write it like this: x sub 1 plus x sub 2 whole divided by 2. And similarly the y coordinate of the midpoint will be equal to y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. Again, this is just a general formula here, right? Formula of the midpoint. So we should not confuse ourselves with the x and y that is inside this green box, right? So here we say this x is actually inside the green box. The x is actually the x coordinate of the midpoint. Similarly, y is the y coordinate of the midpoint, right? So now in our case, what is the x coordinate of our midpoint? Well, the x coordinate of our midpoint is actually A. So can we write it like this? We can say, okay, our x coordinate of the midpoint is actually equal to A. So that must be equal to the x sub 1 and x sub 2. They are the x coordinates of the two extreme points, which are like the P and the P prime, right? So I'm keeping x sub 1 for the x coordinate of P prime, and then for the x coordinate of P, I'm going to use x, because that's what the x coordinate of P, right? And then whole divided by 2. So now we have a nice little equation, and from this equation our task is to solve for the value of x sub 1. That is the unknown that we have to figure out, right? So from here, can we do like this? From here we can say, okay, if we multiply both sides by 2, so we get 2 times A on the left hand side, that is equal to x sub 1 plus x. And from here we can easily see that x sub 1 will be equal to 2 times A minus x, or we can even write it as as negative x plus 2 times a. So we have calculated the value of x sub 1, and that is great because that was one of the tasks to do, and we have one more task to do, that is we have to find the value of y sub 1. So now let's use the y formula there. So from the y formula, as you can see, the y, which is the coordinate of the midpoint, in our case what is the coordinate of our midpoint a? Well, the y coordinate of the midpoint is actually y. It is coincidentally y, so I'm just simply writing y. So that is the y coordinate of our midpoint, and that should be equal to the sum of the y coordinates of the two extreme points. Well, what are our two extreme points here? Well, let me first write it down like this. So you can first say y sub 1 plus y sub 2 all divided by 2, and from here let's substitute the values. So what would be the values? Well, the values would be y sub 1, I'm keeping that for p prime, so I'm keeping y sub 1 for the y coordinate of p prime, plus y2, I'm going to use that for the y coordinate of p. And what is the y coordinate of p? That is actually y, so that is the y coordinate of p. So now we got the sum of the y coordinates of the two extreme points, and that would be whole divided by 2. Now from here you can see that if we multiply both sides by 2, we are going to get a nice equation here. So that would be 2 times y is equal to y sub 1 plus y, and from here can we say that y sub 1 is actually equal to 2 times y minus y, and that will be equal to y. So we have calculated the value of y sub 1 also. So from here we can say, okay, therefore y sub 1 is equal to just y. So we have been able to calculate the values of the two unknowns, which are x sub 1 and y sub 1. So now we know the values. So if we have a point whose coordinates are provided as x and y, and we can easily figure out the coordinates of its image if we take a reflection on the line x equals a, right? And the coordinates of the image would be like this. So let me write it down here. So if our original point was p, whose coordinates were x comma y, and its image, if we call it as p prime, and p prime's coordinates would be, x coordinate would be negative x plus 2 times a, that is the x coordinate, comma, what is the y coordinate? Y coordinate will be same as the y coordinate of the original point, right? That's exactly what we see here. This is the y coordinate right here, which is again same as the y coordinate of the original point, but the x coordinate would be negative x plus 2 times a. So let's take an example, and in the example we're going to use the same formula here. So let's take an example here, right? Suppose our example is like this. Suppose we have a point p which is located at, let's say, 5 comma 10, and we're going to take a reflection of this point on the line which is x equals 2, for example. Let's say we have a straight line which is x equals 2, it's parallel to the y-axis, and we're going to take an image of this point on that line, and then we have to find the coordinates of the image, right? So let's say the image of this point, let's say suppose the image is p prime. So now I'm doing the solution. So the image is p prime, then what would be the x coordinate of p prime? Well, x coordinate would be negative x plus 2 times a. So what is x in this case? Well, x is actually positive 5 and a is actually positive 2. So if I use this nice formula here which says the x coordinate of the image will be negative x plus 2 times a. So here what is negative x? Well, negative x then will become negative 5, then plus 2 times a. What is a? That is another 2, that's a positive 2, a is positive 2. So that is our x coordinate. And then how about the y coordinate? Well, the y coordinate will be exactly same as the y coordinate of the original point. So what is the y coordinate of the original point? Well, that is 10, that is positive 10. So I'm going to simply write positive 10. So that will be the coordinates of the image, right? And if we simplify it a little further, the coordinates of the image will be, so now we have negative 5 and then plus 4, so that would be negative 1 comma 10. So that will be the coordinates of the image of this point. The original point is at 5 comma 10 and its image on the line x equals 2 will be at negative 1 comma 10. Let's take another example. Suppose we have a second example where the point is, say, we can take anywhere. Maybe let's say our point is at, say, negative 5 comma negative 10. This is our original point, and we're going to take its image on the line, let's say x equals negative 1, that is a straight line. So we're going to take the image of this point on this line, and we have to find the coordinates of the image. So the coordinates of the image, can we write it like this? The coordinates of the image would be, let's say the image is p prime, the coordinates would be negative x plus 2a. So what is x here? So this is our x right here, that is the x which is the negative 5, that is the x, and negative 10 is the y. And what is the a? A is the negative 1, right? So here you have x as negative 5, y as negative 10, and a as negative 1, right? So now what would be the x coordinate then? Well, x coordinate would be negative x. That means I'm going to use a negative sign. And then what is the x? Well, x is originally negative 5. So I'm going to write it like this. So negative x plus 2 times a. And what is our a? A is again negative 1. So negative x plus 2 times a, that is our x coordinate. And what would be the y coordinate? Well, y coordinate will be the exact same y coordinate of the original point, which is negative 10. And if we simplify that, this is going to look like this. So it will be positive 5, negative times negative 5, that would be positive 5. And then negative 2, that would be positive 3, comma, negative 10. I hope everything made sense. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.